righty, I think we can go ahead and get started now. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This Thursday, August 31st. We appreciate you making your time to be with us for this hour. We have a lot to cover, so I just wanted to give a real quick intro to us, to KMI first. If you are new to KMI, we are home to the Certified Knowledge Manager program. That's the #1 certification worldwide. It has been for over 20 years now. We're also known for great free content, and you can get that by going to the webinar section here at the top right corner of our website and just come down to full webinar series. And then you'll see what's coming up, and then you'll see all these recordings as well. And a personal tip for me is to check out our top 5 themed webinars. Those are fantastic, but also our more recent ones are really good too. Do check that out when you can for great free content. Also our blog section for articles on KM, and we're always loading new content here as well. So do check that out. So in addition to the certification CKM program, we have opened up the CKS, the Certified Knowledge Specialist series of courses recently, and we have a new one, a brand new course called KM and User Engagement. So we're here today to talk about this topic, and we have our instructor expert team with us from Enterprise Knowledge. That's our award-winning partner, Enterprise Knowledge. We're excited to have them here with us today, and they're going to take a deeper dive into this exciting new topic in one of our newest courses. The debut is coming up end of October. So do check that out when you get a chance. We'll send a link to this and more information. But without further ado, let me go ahead and stop share and hand it over to our EK team. We've got Nina, Logan, and Taylor, and I'll let you take over. Thank you.
All right, that should work. Perfect. Thank you. Can you all see my screen now? Lovely. All right, we'll get into it. But just to reiterate some of the things Eric said, thank you so much, all of you, for joining today. Really looking forward to talking about this topic and also giving you a sneak preview of the course we have coming up. Before I get into introductions from the EK side and a little bit of the content here, just a few housekeeping items. We do have the chat open, and we will do our best to save some time at the end for questions. One of the things I love about these KMI webinars is folks are always active in these chats, and we will do our best to answer any questions that come through. If we do not get to anything here, or if you are watching this recording from the on-demand service through YouTube or through the KMI website, and you are a member of the KMI Slack community, I highly recommend you all reaching out directly to some of us here. I know Taylor and I are really active members of that group, and we'd be happy to answer questions throughout there as well. But without further ado, I will first introduce our team here, and since I have the mic, I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Logan Cort. I am a knowledge management consultant here at Enterprise Knowledge. My focus area is in knowledge management strategy, as well as project management, and also a focus in content strategy as well. I'm a professional Scrum Master as one of the certifications I've worked through, as well as a Certified Associate in Project Management. So I'll be bringing a perspective here from past experiences with delivering projects that focus on enabling your users and making sure that they work for your organization. So really excited to get into that, but I want to make sure we have a chance to introduce everyone. So Taylor, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, happy to. Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor. I'm a knowledge and information management consultant. I joined the EK team after about 7 years of field experience in knowledge management. Formerly senior knowledge manager at Noom. I bring the 0 to 1 experience of getting KM off the ground. And I enjoy working with tech startups and nonprofits in particular. So with a public health background, I love being able to work with mission-oriented organizations. So one thing that I love about working with EK is the network, and of course, partnering with KMI. It's an incredibly supportive network, and it's an incredible place to grow and learn from each other. So excited to work with you all. Nina, go for it.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Nina Spoelker. I am a KM consultant with EK. So just like the rest of them, I'm focused on project coordination, KM strategy, user and market research, and KM implementations. One of my passions right now is actually taking projects from strategy to implementation. So going from pilots to full-scale KM transformations. And I'm actually a certified knowledge specialist through a previous iteration of this full course, and I co-facilitated this course last September. So I'm excited to give you all a sneak preview and then go into it in October if you want to join us then. But I'll throw it back to Logan to kind of give an EK at a glance overview.
Wonderful. Yeah, nice to have you all here. And just to give an idea of what we're going to go through here today, kind of broken it down to 3 big sections. We'll do a bit of level setting at the beginning. I'll keep this short, but want to introduce you all to EK and kind of our experience in delivering successful projects through KM user engagement. And then also do a little level setting on what knowledge management is. And then the bulk of our time together will be about how to power your successful initiatives. So focusing on delivery through strategies such as design thinking, agile methodologies. We'll go through a success story from here at EK to show you what that looks like on a tactical level. And then we'll also be talking about the vehicles to get these things done through change management and communication. And then we'll end off with a brief course preview. So if you're not familiar with EK, as Eric said, we are one of KMI's close partners. It's been a pleasure to work with KMI here, and we co-facilitate several courses here through KMI at the moment, but we are the world's largest dedicated knowledge management consultancy. So there's a lot of information on the slide, but the things I want to call out are our 10 areas of expertise. These are kind of our big buckets of things we do. And the reason I call this out is because we want to talk about how KM user engagement can enable all these different aspects of work in KM. I know there's quite a few knowledge managers on the call, so I want to make sure you all see that the things we're going to talk about here are not just about design, not just about user interfaces, but are really about creating successful KM programs, successful technologies, successful semantic tools, and things like that as well. The other thing I'll add here is also that EK is a group of 80 plus expert consultants. So we all draw upon each other, and all the things we're going to talk about today are frameworks that we have built up over the 10 years of EK's existence, building up strategies and programs and frameworks that you all can take back with you after today. Oops. And then I also want to give a brief preview of our clients here. To show 2 things. One, that EK operates across a variety of industries, countries, different types of organizations. And 2, again, to harken back to the point I just made, that we want to show that no matter what type of organization you're in, these strategies work. We're going to talk about Agile, we're going to talk about design thinking, we're going to talk about change management. And typically some larger organizations or government entities will typically say, that's not going to work here. But we have seen it work on many different cases here. And these are just some of the examples of what that's looked like. And then I will pause here for just a moment. This is, again, a broader look at EK's areas of expertise. But what I want to dive into here is that we're going to talk about today KM user engagement as a method for delivering successful programs. So you'll see in our strategy and design branch, we do this with knowledge management strategies and in agile transformations. So very people-focused programs, making sure that folks are sharing information, communicating within the organization, and buying into the KM programs that you have. But we're also going to talk about technical solutions as well. A lot of my areas of expertise are in delivering technical projects or creating semantic solutions, such as knowledge graphs and ontologies. And these same methodologies can be applied directly to those types of programs as well. So whether it is a technology focused or a strategy focused, user engagement, focusing on your users and making sure that the solution that you are developing works for them is a key part of making sure that your efforts are successful. So just wanted to give you a brief overview and background here. And with that, I will turn it over to Nina to introduce a little bit of our understanding of knowledge management.
Yeah, so I just want to level set on kind of how we define KM at EK. So you've probably heard the definition, something along the lines of getting the right information to the right people at the right time. And we at EK like to break it down into kind of these 5 dimensions, which I'll go into the next slide. But the main focus here are the bolded terms, are the verbs. So we like to focus on capturing, managing, sharing, and finding. This is what KM enables the user to do, which is why it's so critical to capture that user experience and that user feedback to throughout your KM initiative, so that you're building towards them and what they will be empowered to do at the end of it. So on the next slide, I'll kind of break down the 5 dimensions of KM. So when we talk about people, that's kind of the flow of information, the flow of knowledge within your organization. This usually includes factors like access to expertise, communication between and within departments, and maybe KM leadership teams. So these are your users, but seems pretty a clear one-to-one mapping. These are the ones that make up your knowledge ecosystem. They're the ones that hold and consume knowledge that you want to target with your engagement. With process, this also kind of self-explanatory. They are the processes that you will be using to actually engage your users. So this could be something as simple as a suggestion box for website development that creates a feedback loop, or maybe monthly content advisory group meetings built up with user representation so you can iteratively gather and act on user input. With content, that's all of the content, data, information leveraged by your organization so that your staff can do their jobs. And this is things like taxonomies, content types, and for user engagement, this could mean probably as something as simple as documentation associated with those processes. So meeting guidelines, maybe timelines, or meeting cadence for a certain project, or your operating models for your KM team or other groups within your organization. For culture, that's just the organizational behaviors and attitudes towards knowledge in your organization. So these factors will affect heavily how you interact with your users. Have financial incentives worked or not worked in the past, or is gamification maybe a better method? Do employees usually feel safe sharing information or sharing their opinion? These are all things that you'll need to consider and use them as a guide when you're kind of embarking on this user engagement journey. And then lastly, technology. So this is the enabling factor. This is just the KM tools and platforms, your suite that will help you reach your users as long as you select those tools with purpose. So for example, at EK, we use a lot of whiteboard tools. So online collaborative whiteboarding like Mural or Lucidchart to facilitate collaboration with smaller groups. But there are other tools like Mentimeter or SurveyMonkey that might help you reach a larger audience or help you do it more asynchronously. So you want to think about how you're trying to reach those users and what will work best for them and for you to gather that feedback. So on the next slide, I'll talk through kind of how we used to think about KM, because we get a lot of questions about like, do I have to do it now? What's the harm in waiting? There are other things that are more important that should go ahead of KM. But we like to highlight that there is a cost to not implementing KM. You'll see on the left here, the cost of inaction. All of these things, time wasted searching for information, the cost of managing duplicate content are user focused. These are things that users are experiencing that are kind of slowing down work for the company. And that's like slowing productivity, maximizing cost when you should be minimizing it. So on the right here, the realized opportunities, these are all great, but these are only enabled through effective engagement with your users. So without incorporating users throughout your design process, how are you going to know how to improve that delivery for sales? How will you know what factors you should be considering for customer satisfaction through the people who interact with those customers the most? So this is just kind of something to level set and think about when you're thinking about KM and how to start communicating it in terms of business value and those business outcomes. So I want to shift gears now to kind of start to talk about how to power those successful KM initiatives so you can actually realize these opportunities on the right and how the effectiveness of your user engagement can basically make or break it. So throughout the rest of this presentation, we'll briefly discuss some helpful approaches here, and we'll dive deeper into that in our full course in October, but we'll start with design thinking. So what is design thinking? It's a somewhat nebulous topic, but essentially it boils down to this is a human-centered approach to problem solving. So when you think about this, a lot of people think about it in terms of like software development or building a literal application or tool, but you can actually use this to move towards any product goal. So for example, building a KM leadership operating model or creating a marketing campaign, you can use this structure to help you connect with your users and build something, even if it's not a physical tool, that will end up with the final solution that is right for you. So without design thinking, you're making assumptions. You're telling your users what you think they need rather than listening to them and making sure that you're incorporating their needs into the ultimate solution. And it also kind of boxes you in. Without talking to your users, you might not be opened up to newer innovative solutions that you could be inspired by user feedback to come up with. So with it, you've got an increased chance of faster adoption and quick wins, so that tangible value that will help you garner buy-in quickly so you can keep building your KM initiatives. And you're focusing on the end user there. You're leveraging your collective expertise, so within your team and of the users within your organization, and you're empathizing with them, making them feel heard. And this kind of utilizes that feedback mechanism to kind of have a give and take. So you're iteratively developing based on what they need, and you're able to come up with the best solution at the end of it. So on the next slide, we'll kind of talk through the EK model that we like to use. So there are a lot of types of design thinking models, but we like to use this one. So empathizing, define, ideate, prototype, test. And this, you'll see it looks linear, but it is technically a cycle. You'll see all of the arrows kind of going back. One important thing to note is that the design thinking cycle is something that is just continuous. So you're going to be backtracking, you're going to be skipping ahead, you're going to be continuing to do this. So it is not a failure to have to backtrack to, maybe you're in the test phase, you're jumping back to empathize so that you can learn more about your users, or you have to jump back to define, to redefine your problem based on the challenges you've been hearing. So this is just a structure to kind of give you an approach, but you can jump around to wherever you need to go to make sure that you're delivering the best final solution. So I'm going to walk through each of these steps pretty briefly, and then give you an example of what you might be doing. For instance, if the problem was developing an organizational KM operating model. So with empathize, also self-explanatory, you're understanding your users. So what are their motivations, frustrations, goals, and you're aligning them. So some of these outcomes might be things like personas or empathy maps, understanding the types of users and what they are seeing and thinking and doing. So an example for the KM operating model, you might want to conduct focus groups with members of your organization, both parallel to a KM team and maybe those members who would be in the KM team. And maybe create some personas on the types of users that would be interacting with this KM operating model. Then you might jump to define. So you want to clarify the challenge you're solving for based on what you've learned about your users, not assumptions you've made beforehand. And this will give you a clear scope and a focused challenge statement to be leveraged for future decision-making and ideating. So it'll be kind of your North Star. And this is flexible. Your definition will likely change multiple times throughout this process, and that is okay, and that is expected. You need to embrace the ambiguity and know that you will always be able to redefine, make tweaks based on what your users are saying. So for the KM operating model, you might be able to prioritize those user requirements that you were gathering in the empathize phase. And you might want to decide, how many team members will there be? How many teams should be represented within this operating model? What is the scope of this group? So once you answer those questions, you have a clear definition, and move on to ideate. So this is when you literally throw ideas at the wall. Don't hold back. This is when you get everything out there, and then you can scale back as you need to. So this is just a wide range of ideas from a wide range of people, and you want to see if you can get to ideas that are beyond the obvious. Things that if you put out everything you could think of, what's one more step that you haven't thought of before? So for the KM operating model, it might be different types of structures for your team. So is it centralized or decentralized? Is it hierarchical or is it flat? Or it could be something completely out of the box, like a square. I don't know, but it could be any structure that you're kind of throwing at the wall. And this is based on what you've been learning about your users so far. Then once you kind of have these ideas figured out, you'll narrow them down, prioritize, and then move on to prototype. So you're creating something that your users can actually interact with. And the goal is to answer questions and find gaps that will help bring you closer to that final solution. So one of the great things about this is it gives you quantitative and qualitative data from interacting with users to inform further testing. And it helps you kind of tweak and refine your definition. and also allows for quick pivoting. It's usually pretty easy to do small updates based on what the users are talking about and have it happen pretty quickly. So for the KM operating model, it might be something like a journey map for a task that a KM lead as a member of the KM operating model would be carrying out. And you might sit down with users and have them fill in how they're feeling about each step of the process or where they think they would go for this kind of information. And maybe in this phase, you find out that there's a new kind of challenge that you're trying to solve. So you have to jump back to define and figure out, okay, maybe we have to redefine the problem and then move forward from there. Or maybe you don't have enough ideas to choose from. You need to go back to the drawing board, think of some more. So again, backtracking and then going back through again is all part of the plan. And then lastly, testing. So this is when you're going back to your users with your product and you're establishing that feedback loop again. So you're identifying problems that you want to address with later updates. So this is also fast feedback from your users, and it helps you with some course corrections that will inform future validation. So for the operating model, that might be conducting a pilot with the KM operating team, focusing on a single initiative like building a change management plan to test the model in practice. So you can see how it's working, tweak, and then go back and make sure that you're creating the final solution there. So that's a design thinking process in reality and practice with an example there. And I'll hand it off to Logan now to talk a little bit more about Agile and how that supports KM.
Yeah, thank you, Dina. And I want to, before I move on here, I think there's a really helpful connection point here. And I am going to speak about Agile methodologies and how they apply, but they really go hand in hand with design thinking here. And one of the ways that we think about empathizing and defining at EK is by developing a strong use case. So working with users, understanding what their problems are, and then also saying, all right, let's understand the core of your problem and let's develop a use case that can be solved for to create the highest level of impact here. So we're in the empathize phase, we're understanding, all right, you as a knowledge manager within your organization, what are you struggling with? And then in the define phase, it would be, okay, we are now defining a use case for your KM operating model that is solving X, Y, and Z problem. And from there, then you can take your Agile methodologies and apply this to creating programs or moving back to your empathize and define to update use cases, create new use cases, and create a backlog of use cases if you need to. So I wanted to have that kind of as a level setting groundwork before I get into this next piece here. The reason we speak about Agile and Agile methodologies in conjunction with design thinking and user engagement is because they really go hand in hand when used correctly. So, a lot of organizations have either experimented with Agile, either some project teams work within Agile within an organization. So these topics may not be new, but I think the applications here are incredibly important to understand the connections between user engagement and design thinking here. The other thing, as I was looking through the participants here, I recognize a lot of familiar names. I know some folks are independent consultants. I see some folks that are KM knowledge managers in teams of 1 or teams of 2 or 3. So I really want to speak here about talking about how Agile can work for a small project team, but an entire organization can leverage Agile. A small project team, a department, a team of 1 can leverage Agile as well to make sure that all of these aspects of design thinking and user engagement are part of the Agile process. But to introduce you all to the Agile KM Manifesto, you may be familiar with the Agile Manifesto. We made some slight updates here at EK during KM World last year to kind of define what KM and Agile look like together. So the core tenets are that individuals and interactions are the most important thing over processes and tools. So, you can set up all the frameworks in the world, but it does not matter unless your users and the people within your organization feel like they are heard, feel like the tools that you are delivering to them are useful, and that folks are, able to do the work that they need to do. Another one is collaboration over negotiation. This is typical in consulting fields, but also in customer-facing organizations. You want to make sure that you are collaborating with your customers. So what this might look like for, in terms of a technology, let's use a web page for an example. You want to make sure that you are providing as many opportunities for a user of that web page to provide feedback, so that you can hear what's going well for them, what's not going well, and you can add more use cases or things to solve for to help your users better. Same thing applies for an internal web page, making sure, whether it's a knowledge base or a knowledge portal or something like that. And then working software over comprehensive documentation. I think this one is one of the most core aspects of Agile and the way it should be executed within your organization. A lot of folks, when starting out a new venture, trying to create a new system or tool or program, they want to make sure that it is most polished, most perfect thing before anyone sees it. But whenever we see that happen, we typically see those folks come back to the drawing board because they realize either no one liked it, it wasn't what people actually needed. It might be working in its own right, but it didn't actually fit the needs of the user. So we want to make sure that we are creating working software and things that work every step of the way so that users can test it, provide good feedback, and you can get that user engagement and go through those design thinking cycles to make sure you're creating something actually valuable. And then responding to change. This is a big one. I recognize that for most organizations, the way to get things started is to create a very thoughtful plan, lay out, here's what we're going to do in month 4, here's what we're going to do on the 3rd day of the 2nd week of month 4, and here's exactly how it's going to work out for us. Those things, as they say about best laid plans, those things do not always work out. We want to make sure that there's space for iteration, there's space for change, and that there is space for organizations to kind of pivot as users' needs change as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about those. We want to kind of introduce you to the core tenets here. Another thing I think is a very helpful introduction to Agile is you may have heard of the Agile, plane method metaphor, where it's building a plane as a hang glider, and then a propeller plane, and then a jet engine or jet plane, and things like that. But we really like to think about it in terms of minimum viable products. So, in our case here, we're talking about building a bridge. So a minimum bridge, is maybe you bridge the gap just a little bit, but there's still a hole in the middle. You are getting towards the gist of what you want to be solving for, but it's not actually meeting anyone's needs. And, if it's me and I needed to cross a bridge, I'd be going a different route rather than jumping over the one with the hole. And then in the case of minimum viable, we want to make sure that it is something that can work. It may not be the end state, but it is something that users are willing to use so that they can provide meaningful feedback to you. So an example here would be a footbridge. It is a bridge that shows that you can cross that body of water, but we want to hear from those users to say, all right, what's working well here, what's not. And they might say, it's a beautiful bridge, it's built nicely, but it can't support my car. So then we would develop our use case a little bit more and say, okay, we need this thing that's crossing water to be a bridge that can support a car. And that would move to, creating a viable final product. And what is not shown here is that while this looks like 3 steps, this minimum and viable step is a case of piloting, creating new use cases, and continuously testing with users. And this could be 1 iteration, 3 iterations, 100 iterations till you get to the final thing. But the goal is that you are building something that actually works for users at every step of the way so that they can provide valuable feedback and improve upon the process. So the reason I show you these 2 slides are to introduce you to the Agile methodologies here, but also to start to think about how you can build in Agile methodologies and user validation, user feedback, and design thinking aspects to Agile methodologies. So I'll talk a little bit more about that here. This may be familiar to some folks, but I want to break this down. This is kind of an overview of how to break down work within an Agile framework. So, for example, if our initiative is, again, building a bridge, one of our epics might be designing the bridge. One of our epics might be under designing, you would also have things like hiring an architect and sketching out plans and having those validated. But what I really want to talk about here is that most folks think of subtasks or stories within Agile frameworks as things that need to be completed in their own right. And then once they are, if you're using a Kanban style, so things like Trello or Jira, once they're moved to the done column, they're done forever and they don't need to be touched again. We really like to think about subtasks and as validation. So for example, if one of my subtasks is to create a plan for the bridge, I also want another subtask to be to go to all of the bridge experts within the organization and say, all right, does this stand up? Does this fit to your expectations? And if it doesn't, that validation piece can be closed, but you might want to reopen the ticket for designing the bridge and continuously doing that. So the thing I'm really trying to hit on here is that as you are going through your creating your KM programs or KM technologies, build in tasks for validating with users, making sure that they're meeting executives' expectations, make sure they are meeting the best practices set out by subject matter experts within your organization. Really prioritize that user engagement. So Taylor made a great comment in the chat a few minutes ago about making sure that you're building a strong base. And one of the best ways you can do that is by creating a piece of work and by validating it with as many people as possible so that you can say, all right, I've done this thing. It has been strongly backed by these executives, these stakeholders, these users. They say this is a great piece of work, and that is building your strong foundation for the next thing to build on top of it. The other way I like to think about this is the Agile lifecycle in KM. So whereas in your subtasks, your stories, and your epics, you are building this large backlog of what you want to do within your KM program. In almost all Agile methodologies, you're breaking work into sprints, so typically 2 weeks sprint, and you're moving items from your backlog into your sprint backlog to be focused on there. Again, we want to make sure that part of your sprint planning, part of the work that you're planning out for those 2 weeks is also building in validation time. We see too often with organizations that the sprint backlog is full of, let's get this done, let's have this closed, but it's not building in enough time for validating with stakeholders within your organizations or making sure the thing you built was actually useful. So what that causes, we've seen for one organization I worked with recently, they had a program where they had set up, within our 2 week sprints, we want to hit X, Y, or Z number of story points. We want to make sure that all of these tickets are closed by the end of it. And what that meant was that developers or people working on the project were creating things that worked in their own right. But then whenever it came around time to show those things to executives and everyone was excited to say, here's this thing we built, isn't this great? They said, well, nobody checked this with me. This is not actually useful. And it made it so that folks were extremely frustrated, disenchanted with the program they were building, and they felt like all that work was for naught. And one of the things is you as a knowledge manager or program manager or project manager can do is to come back and say, all right, let's spend the time on validation. Let's make sure this is actually a strong working piece before we move forward and create things with dependencies that will cause us to work back down here. And the pushback we typically will see from organizations, we say, okay, Agile is great, but myself as a knowledge manager within the organization, I can't get started on this until I have a strong plan. And all of these Agile methodologies are not to say you do not have a plan. They are to say, all right, let's make a plan that is ready to be changed at a moment's notice, can respond to users as they need it. So one of the things we recommend doing is creating Agile roadmaps. So these may, I see, Jennifer, you made a mention of Monday.com, which is a great road mapping and work management tool. One of the things you'll see in there is, large bars of work that, go across a long period of time. And we suggest two things to do in these cases. So in the case of using things like Monday.com, we want to make sure that we are tracking work in increments. So that means that, let's look at this roadmap example here. Developing and implementing a KM governance framework. One of the things will be creating the KM governance framework, and that may take 2 months. But we also want to have a level lower, and we would in a different diagram here that would have, all right, there's 3 weeks for getting user input. There's another 4 weeks for actually creating the KM governance framework. And then the last week or so is for validating with users. And then the launch of the framework would happen iteratively in small groups over that. So we want to make sure there's a smaller view with different pieces that can be moved around and changed as you go. And then the last thing I'll add here is we also want to make sure that we are showing value at each step of the way. So creating small changes, showing them often. And again, that allows you to get feedback as you're going. And what that does is, to show measurable progress, allows you to plan for change, and it also makes it so that you can return on your investment quicker. I will only spend a minute on this slide. But the thing I want to harp on here in the case of Agile is these are all things we've heard before, whether it's KM, whether it's a new project, whatever it is, we want to make sure that we are showing that we can do these things on an incremental basis. So, for example, why should I change how I've done things my entire career? That is a valid question when you're asking someone to change every single thing about how they record their knowledge from a project or transfer tacit knowledge within an organization. So one of the things we like to do is we say, we're not going to change all that all at once. We just want you to experiment with, let's say if we're working with the example of a project closeout, we want you to just experiment with writing out one paragraph about what you did on the project and then sending that to someone within your knowledge management team. And that is a much smaller ask that still presents quite a bit of value. And it makes it so that that person does not feel like they are being asked to change their entire processes, that they are being asked to change everything about themselves. They are just being asked to add one small thing. And then you can go back to them and say, hey, when you wrote that paragraph, was that a huge lift for you? How long did it take? What were your struggles? And then you can say, all right, for the next piece of it, when we're actually asking them to create a knowledge base page or a piece of content, we're making sure that it's actually useful to it's not a hindrance to them. It's actually useful to us. So rather than changing the entire way you're tracking project closeout, start in small steps and show those users as well as the executives within your organization that it can work and what it looks like when it does work. Now I'm gonna take a sip of water here. And I will leave, this is my last piece before I turn over to Taylor here to talk about kind of the vehicles for making these changes. But I think there's some really important points here. I won't walk through all of them, but the few I want to hit on here is first starting with number one. Do not make assumptions about your users. Here it says avoid making too many assumptions, but I would recommend, if at all possible, make no assumptions. You want to, and if you are making assumptions, log those, actually validate the assumptions with someone that would know. There's a way of making assumptions with actually making them validated as well. And what that looks like is going back to what Nina was speaking about, coming back to folks within your organization, empathizing with them, understanding what they're doing, and then also creating meaningful change bit by bit that's validated each step of the way. Number two is another one I think is important, especially as I'm seeing a lot of folks that are knowledge managers and small teams within your organization, is ensuring adequate leadership support. This may mean creating a great plan from the start for some organizations, but hopefully this means that you can say, all right, here is my rough idea of a plan. Here's what I would like to do in the end state. I want just permission to get started. I want to go meet with 20 people from out the organization. I want to ask them questions about what they're struggling with in these spaces. And I am going to, from there, start designing an idea, come back to you, and then leverage, discuss those with you each step of the way. The last one I will hit on here is number 7, work to provide tangible value. You want to make sure that everything you are doing along the way is actually showing value to those leadership members as well as your users. And you want to make sure that they are seeing the value of what they're being asked to participate in. Folks will also be much more happy to engage and use a tool and provide feedback if they were part of the development process on the front end. They'll feel involved and they feel like what they're being asked to do is actually helpful. I misspoke earlier. I do have one more section here I want to talk about, which is a success story that EK has been working on. And it is with a large multinational financial institution. So what we did for them was built a knowledge portal that allowed them to see research and that had already been done within their organization. Because of the size of the organization, they were having issues with knowing what had already been done, knowing what types of data assets had already been purchased, and they were repurchasing things, recreating work, all of your typical knowledge management challenges. And so they asked EK to help them develop a knowledge portal that would allow them to search across all the research and also past experiences with the organization to say, here, I have a question about when this has happened. And I've created like a rough mock-up here. And the goal is to create a knowledge portal that would give them the answer, would also give them documents that they can use to see what was going on, understand or look at different resources they could use in the future, and also contact the folks that worked on those projects or that research before. And the reason I wanted to show this is because this was a large engagement that was broken up into several different pieces with a central goal of creating a knowledge portal. So I highlighted a few items here. In the interest of time, I'm only going to hit on 2 or 3 and then transition over to Taylor. But part of this knowledge portal was an enterprise taxonomy design, the front-end design for the portal, the back-end content management system, and then also creating the knowledge graph that created this knowledge portal. So a huge piece here. And what I've kind of detailed out in these separate sections of boxes here are the different steps that they took, this team took to make sure that they were engaging with their users, making sure they were validating with their users and creating something of value at each step of the way. So to start out, one of the first things we did was work with folks from across the organization to look at their current existing taxonomies or metadata. And we did interviews and focus groups with them. So whereas, it might seem like you can put all the taxonomy terms into a spreadsheet, determine what's of value, that is never going to give you the core understanding of how folks use metadata or taxonomy terms on a daily basis. So we went into those groups, we asked them questions, we asked them to provide us feedback, and we did this nearly a dozen times. And so what that allowed us to do was come with one, at the first few, we were just asking questions. What do you do? What do you work? What works well here? What would you like to see? And then in later sessions, able to say, here's what we're starting to think about. Here's what we're putting together. What do you think? And that allows folks to give you a much better set of feedback than just them imagining, and allows them to be involved in the process every step of the way. The other thing I'll touch on here, the taxonomy design example really speaks to the semantics piece. In terms of the development piece, I think it's really important to talk about user interface testing. It's a highly documented field of user experience and user interface testing, but something we did along the way to say, all right, here's something we've created. Here's a mock-up. What are your reactions? And that was for stakeholders and executives, so they could say, this looks great, this doesn't look great, here's what we'd like to see. But it also allowed users to click around and understand what it would be like to use that on a daily basis. And then the last thing I'll touch on here is that this was a product that was being built by a small portion of the organization for use by by a larger portion of the organization. So it was critical that folks on this team were road showing, saying, here's something we've built and validated, and then also something that we can go and show to executives and people within different departments so that they can understand all the different aspects here. So this is just to give you a framework of all the different examples of ways you can use user engagement, Agile, and user testing and validation to create large KM initiatives. In this case, a technology product, but can be other things along the way as well. And the last thing I'll touch on here is just the change management piece. This is a large change for any organization. You want to make sure that we are allowing them to have time to change and respond to changes as they're coming up. So to go more into that section, I will hand it over to Taylor to speak a little bit about change management and communications.
Thanks so much, Logan. That was a thorough overview of what we will cover about Agile methodologies here. And to recap, Nina covered the design thinking approach paired with the Agile. We're creating a trifecta here by including change management and communications as the third pillar here for utilizing user engagement to promote your knowledge management initiatives. So if you want to go ahead and go to the next slide, Logan, I want to just chat through change management. It has become somewhat of a buzzword in our industry and among any business and corporate literature. So the way that we like to define it comes from the American Society for Quality. And it's the methods and manners in which a company describes and implements change within its internal and or external processes. So while we do see it as a trifecta with our design thinking and Agile methodology, change management doesn't typically stand alone or stand independent because there's a dependency on the processes that are being built or utilized. And so the processes are what we went through with Nina around the design thinking, starting around empathizing. And remember that chart that went through the process. Similarly, with what Logan went through, we're talking about the Agile processes of designing, piloting, and scaling, and breaking projects down into bite-sized pieces that are actionable. So think about change management as a bucket or a discipline that amplifies or enables what you have accomplished with your design thinking and your Agile approach. So again, the ways that you can then engage that discipline are through communications, engagement activities, monitoring and evaluation techniques. You can see this leveraging quality assurance and metrics. Training and coaching, of course, are some of the standard activities that we see when people are rolling out and implementing new KM initiatives. So why don't we go to the next slide, Logan? I want to show you what change management can look like. It can look like managing resistance to change. We can see burnout. We can see change resistance. We can see just change fatigue in general. And so understanding your audience and understanding the environment in which you're implementing a change can allow you to manage that prior to rollout. Providing knowledge on how to change. So there are certainly some human behavior and psychological applications around behavior change that can be utilized. So that way you are approaching your audience with empathy, back to that design thinking approach. Communications are key. There's so much power in the words that we choose as humans in our interactions. And so choosing and planning the communications with a lot of prep time can be key. And also escalating those communications plans to experts can be supportive, can be a way to get support. Incentivizing participation, whether that's through recognition or something more technical like gamification, that can be a way to, again, ease the point of entry for any kind of initiative rollout. Creating a feedback loop, listening to employees and ensuring that the design, again, the goal with the design thinking is that you have built your personas, you have built an understanding and empathized with the employees. So just the use of design thinking methodology is already an indication that you are listening to employee feedback. So we want to create a secondary loop here to make sure that there's an additional layer of feedback for the implementation or the change itself. So coaching employees through the transition, I think that's what we typically think of when we think of change management as a box to check off of our list. But as you can see here, we've expanded that to more disciplines and action items. Building sponsorship, going back to that cost of inaction slide from before, building sponsorship, getting executive buy-in will go a long way in getting you into the right rooms with the right people and allow you to access resources to be successful. All in all, the goal of change management, making data-driven decisions. This is where that Agile approach comes in. With Agile methodology, it's hard to get through a rollout without what is the saying? There's no rock unturned, there's no stone unturned here. So because you're using such a thorough methodology, the team can trust that your processes are thorough and that you're making data-driven decisions. So why don't we go to the last slide? I want to show you again kind of the relationship here with communications and change management. So think about, these are some things to consider as you're going through your applications. Are we communicating a consistent, clear, and relevant vision? How do we respond to concerns in an authentic, transparent way? What types of messages do we need to develop? And which audience are those messages going to? Have we been clear on what the expectations are that we have for people and for ourselves as well, for the internal team working on this? And then again, what feedback mechanisms can we set up? Lastly, how do we equip associates with the knowledge and ability to thrive amid the change? Last slide here about our changing communications segment. Again, we want to think about change management and communications as not only a layer that sits on top of your methodology for user engagement, but we also want to create a foundation as well. There's the technical side and there's the people side. And so by thinking about the changes on the spectrum of the people and the behaviors that you're changing, while also thinking about the digital environment that you are changing, that will allow you to accelerate getting from your current state through the transition state and your target ideal future state. So I really like this visual because it does show you that change is on a spectrum, and with one, even if you developed the best Agile methodology, you had every process in place, if we do not give the people in the communication side of the change our energy, the implementation would be lacking a sustainable implementation. Vice versa, if we are solely focusing on the communications and the planning on rollout, but we don't give the technical side a thorough investigation and prep and planning, it's going to be more challenging to get from your current to your future state. So we want to leave you today. We've got about 7 minutes left together. We want to give you a sneak preview for the course that we have coming up in October. So it's going to be 2 days, October 24th and 25th. And day one is going to be about setting those foundations, just like we were talking about in the chat. It's really important to understand, even as a group in a course, to set up those foundations and understanding. So we want to give you the user engagement overview. So this is going to be, there's going to be slide materials, and we're going to be facilitating a lively discussion around some of the concepts and around design thinking, the agile methodology expansions that Logan went through, and then again, going back to the change management and communication applications. We'll then go through how to make KM initiatives succeed. So we're taking the core concepts, now we're putting them within the context of knowledge management. So bringing it all together through collaborative and digital activities. So that way you can not only learn from us, you can learn from the other participants and students. And the good news is we get to learn from you all along the way as well. So day 2, about applications. We want this to be a valuable use of your time. And so there's going to be a section for designing your own KM solution, utilizing this user engagement, design thinking, and agile approach. So again, we're going to be using that empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and testing framework so that you're able to build your own agile KM roadmap. So by the end, you will have your KM roadmap. We'll be able to put that within a delivery method for your change management communication strategy. Of course, it wouldn't be agile and it wouldn't be user design savvy if it didn't come with its own pilot plan. And then there'll be a bit of a surprise at the end for course closure. So we're excited to offer this with you again, Enterprise Knowledge, partnering with KMI to bring you the best curriculum around user engagement that's on the market. And KMI's platform for hosting the course is allowing us to really have a great advanced digital experience together. So learning objectives here. This is going to be our closing slide here, and we'll leave just a few moments for questions. We want to make sure that if you take this course with us, that you leave with an understanding of the background and foundations of agile design thinking and change management. We want to ensure that you're learning the proven methodologies for leading and engaging in users and stakeholders and identifying those KM needs and challenges, ideating potential KM solutions, and then designing, implementing, and testing. We want to equip you with the opportunity for practice. So again, there's going to be short-term workshopping techniques and then long-term strategic planning applications that you will walk away with. And so we hope that this would be a valuable use of your time. And Eric, and if I haven't missed anything here in the learning objectives, maybe we're ready to walk into questions.
Yeah. I don't see any questions in the chat, but I'll give folks another minute while I kind of give a last minute thought here. Eric has shared out throughout here, the ability to sign up for this course. So please feel free to go ahead and do that. We really look forward to having folks from this community joining us in October. And the last thing I'll also add here is that if you have any questions that come up later, again, feel free to reach out to us directly in the KMI Slack community. I'll be looking throughout there and I'll make sure we can get your questions answered. And then for anything logistical, please direct those to Eric for registering for the course or anything like that. But thank you all for joining us today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday and a nice weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, EK team. Take care.